Hey, welcome back to the Unbelievable Podcast. I am BJ Reidell, back here with my guy, Drew Mahowald, and today we have a significant Minnesota Vikings free agent signing. After about a week and a half of everyone whining and complaining about how Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell are just the same thing as Rick Spielman and Mike Zimmer, they finally made a move that is significant, different, and looks forward thinking, at least in my opinion, and that is the signing of former Packers outside linebacker and pure edge rusher, Za'Darius Smith. This episode, of course, will focus mainly on that. There's some other stuff that's been going on in Vikings territory since we last spoke as well. We may touch on that. We'll see what happens as well. But the main focus here is Za'Darius Smith, what he brings to the Vikings organization, the type of player that he is, and really kind of what signals this, what this signals for Minnesota and the direction that they're heading following, this big name contract. That I don't think a lot of us really were expecting, especially because the last time I spoke with you guys, I actually brought him up and said he was going to be a Baltimore Raven. So a lot has changed since we last spoke. So that's the game plan for today. Before we get started, of course, I want to quick mention Lake Monster Brewing. Of course, the draft party with partner with Climbing the Pocket will be on April 29th, beginning at, I believe, was it 5 p.m.? 5:30 p.m. 5:30 p.m. to 10 p.m. at Lake Monster Brewing. Come check out the team. We'll have a little bit of a draft party going out for you there. All the boys there on the Climbing the Pocket roster will be over there drinking some nice beers there from the Lake Monster tap, and also sharing some draft knowledge, having some fun with you guys as well. There's going to be some giveaways. I don't know. Hopefully you guys were involved in the March Madness bracket giveaway as well. I'm sure there's going to be some more giveaways leading up to that, so keep an eye on the Climbing the Pocket Twitter. And then, of course, leading up to it, feel free to try a beer. I mean, why not, right? Like, what's the worst that can happen? I know you guys like beer. Football and beer kind of go like this, right? And for those of you who are just listening to the show, I'm crossing my fingers. So, all right, Lake Monster Brewing.
Radio.
5:30 to 10, April 29th. All right, let's get into Za'Darius Smith here. So, like I said, huge, significant impact signing for the Vikings in a number of different ways. First and foremost, a former Packer player, right? And I think we're all very familiar with who he is, given that he put Kirk Cousins down 3.5 times last year in one single game. What are your thoughts? I mean, it's big money. It's a 3-year contract, and you got to pay this guy significantly. I believe it's a 14.25 average annual value, I believe is the number there. And he's 29 years old. So technically, by the time we get to the NFL season, he'll be 30. So you'll be paying this guy about until he's 32, 33 years old. What are your initial thoughts seeing this sign?
I mean, clearly the Vikings are trying to build to win now, right? Or it seems like it. I mean, you watch what the Vikings have done the last couple of years, and it doesn't seem like there's a ton of direction. And I think a lot of that, it just seems like that because usually a team that's this strapped by the cap kind of goes into rebuild mode. The Vikings are continually pushing money out into the future. Void years on these contracts. I think Za'Darius may have a void year, but you have one with Kirk now. And then you also move money now down the road with Danielle Hunter's contract a little bit to create that room to allow for this pair of pass rushers. So clearly the Vikings are going in on this year and on this roster, despite all of the flaws that there still is with this team. So, I mean, here's the thing. If you're going to go in and try to win now with this team, I like the move. I mean, Za'Darius Smith, when healthy, as we've seen the last couple of years, one of the most effective pass rushers in the NFL, pressure rate through the roof. He and Hunter are each top 5 in terms of getting to the quarterback successfully. And, I think we always talk about how sacks can be misleading. DJ Wanham last year had 8 sacks, and I want to say on 7 of them, he did not beat an offensive lineman to get there. I think it was early Mike Zimmer's freakish blitzes and confusing schemes that kind of freed up Wanham a bunch of times. And so here you get Smith and Hunter, who specialize in actually beating one or potentially 2 offensive linemen or tight ends that are there to block him. So I love the move for a team that's in win now mode. It seems to be the Vikings are in win now mode, and setting aside where I think the Vikings should be going in the direction as a franchise, and instead focusing on this team winning as many games as possible this year, I like the move a lot. I think the money's worth the risk. And again, there's injuries. I understand that, but at the end of the day, any team that wins a championship or any team that contends has to get some injury luck. That's absolutely necessary. And so whether that's with guys with injury past or not, you have to take that risk. And I think this is a good one.
Absolutely. Yeah. The injury risk, what Drew is alluding to, of course, that Za'Darius Smith missed 16 out of 17 games last season. Prior to that, though, in his first 2 years with the Packers, he played 32 out of 32 games, of course, netting a grand total of 26 sacks in that time, as well as a career high with 13 and a half in 2019. So, yes, sacks are a little bit misleading, but the best part about this guy is that it's not just the sacks. He's not just getting the result. Drew also mentioned it's the pressure rate. I believe since 2019, as Drew kind of alluded to, Danielle Hunter and Za'Darius Smith, 1 and 2 in pressure rate at the edge rusher position, whether that's a 4-3 outside, a 4-3 defensive end or a 3-4 outside linebacker. And that kind of brings me to my next point. If you're looking at, and we did kind of talk about this a little bit here, where, on this show, I believe Drew and I's opinion kind of aligns that this team is a step or two away from contending for a Super Bowl, maybe 3 or 4 steps, actually. This move here, in theory, does bring you 1 step closer, but you still got some gaps to fill. I want to see what they do at cornerback, things of that nature, before I really start to get optimistic that they can actually contend here. But this is a forward-thinking move and something that I really appreciate from this regime, because this is a 34 edge rusher in the purest sense, right? This is a guy that worked with Mike Smith. He's also worked with Mike Pettin, both on the Vikings coaching staff now. He knows what he's going to be asked to do. And more importantly, he can teach what he's being asked to do. It's similar to when Terrence Newman came in, or pick your Mike Zimmer disciple that came in throughout his tenure with the Vikings and helped out with whether it's the double A gap blitz alignments, whether it's the different packages that he was running in nickel, whether it was the style of blitz that he was going to try to employ, and the type of camouflage, if you will, that he was trying to put in his defense. These are all things that Za'Darius Smith can help with, in the sense that he knows what he's supposed to be doing and he's really good at it. The age is a question mark, right? I have a little bit of concern with a 30-year-old player that just missed 16 games with significant injury. There's that element to it, of course. But if the stars align and it looks like he's going to be healthy, you have to assume that in order to sign with this team, that he passed a physical, that he passed some conditioning tests, they did some level of, something with the Vikings. They did their research to ensure that he's going to be ready, assuming nothing happens again, right? So assuming those things are true, you have to love this move from a standpoint that, what it was the term that Kwesi used today in his press conference, a competitive rebuild. Mm-hmm. This is the definition of a.
Yeah, he said, best of both worlds between, and that's to me, that's GM speak. That's what Rick Spielman would have said, is trying to build for the future while also trying to win now. That's what he said. But I think I like what you were saying about, because I think that was one of the things you were really concerned about our show last week, was the fact that the Vikings seem to be kind of trying to win now, despite what's clearly going to be a difficult reset defensively, right, with a whole new scheme. You got all these veterans who have been so successful in Mike Zimmer's kind of 4-3 base and his exotic nickel blitzes and whatnot. Now you have a whole new system coming in, whole new defensive coaching staff coming in to teach a whole new concept. So one would expect a reset there, or not necessarily reset, a setback, if you will. And so bringing in someone like Smith, who has not only thrived in it, but knows it very well and seems like that charismatic leader type of character that can really, help the younger players on the team mold to it and quickly adapt to it, is huge as well. So in that sense, it is kind of a forward-thinking move, for the future. If we expect Donatell to be around for a while. So I like that a lot. It's another piece of this I didn't kind of think about, but in the short term, I mean, if we can just, like you were cross the fingers, or they're cross the fingers for a healthy season of Hunter and Smith, that is just terrifying for, the rest of the Vikings opponents this year, but specifically Packers fans for 2 games this year.
I do think that's kind of fun. I mean, technically, the Packers did release Za'Darius Smith. He wasn't right. You know what? This wasn't a situation
And I
where the Packers
believe
were trying
he's
to resign.
on. I believe the Packers have a cap hit for Za'Darius this year, if I'm
Oh,
not
they do.
mistaken.
Oh, they
Yeah.
do. They'll be paying him multi-million dollars while he's playing for the Vikings, which is that much more fun. Technically, it's not theft, right? The Vikings, engaged him after he had been released from the Packers. So, Packers fans are like, "Oh, we let him go. You guys got our sloppy seconds." Whatever. You guys would love to have him back. We all know that. So, the thing
Well,
that
they got to pay Rodgers $50 million a year. So this is the consequence of that, I suppose.
It is, to some degree. It is. I mean, they basically picked, their middle linebacker and Aaron Rodgers, and then in a sense, then lose Devontae Adams and Za'Darius Smith. Those are the consequence of, Andre Campbell and Aaron Rodgers. So, whatever. This isn't a Packers show. Whatever. In terms of one other piece that I really like about this signing is that Danielle Hunter has kind of been in a bad way for about a year, maybe more. Right. I pretty much since. As Mike Zimmer downplayed the injury that he had, Danielle Hunter's kind of been
right? It's a tweak was the word
tweak,
that Zimmer
right.
used. Yeah, it ends up being a year-long injury.
Exactly, right. I think basically since then he's sort of been like, you know what, I don't need to be a Viking. I can go somewhere else, whatever. One of the first questions that the media asked was to Za'Darius Smith was like, have you talked to Danielle Hunter? Do you know Danielle Hunter? How do you feel about playing with Danielle Hunter? And he not only had answers for him, but it's literally been a focal point of the conversation for this guy. He's like, "Oh yeah, I called him up right away. I let him know I was thinking about signing here." And he was like, "That's great, man. We're gonna be a great duo. We could tend to be the best in the league." It sort of reinvigorates Danielle Hunter. Whereas just what was 72 hours ago, we were talking about Danielle Hunter potentially getting traded and talking about how the Vikings are, kind of wishy-washy on converting his salary to bonus. All of a sudden, like he's locked in. It's like, all right, these are your two pass rushers for 2022 and potentially the foreseeable future. Now you've got a Danielle Hunter who's excited to play football again, or so it seems, right? That's what it sounds like. But I mean, Za'Darius Smith tweets a picture of him and Danielle Hunter at the Pro Bowl. They apparently have had conversations already since he's been here. This is a good way to get, put stock back in to Danielle Hunter's camp. It's like, we're going to get you a guy that's going to help make your life easier. And on top of that, it's a fun guy, right? Like a guy that you apparently like. You've talked to him at the Pro Bowl. You apparently have each other's cell numbers. Like, each other pretty well. You know each other from playing against each other at LSU and Kentucky. I mean, you could be friends with this dude, right? Like, you got yourself a buddy that's a stud as well. Like, this is a good way to rebuild that defensive line after you kick his coach out the door and, pissed him off a little bit, said some stupid stuff in the media while Mike Zimmer was around. This is a good thing to kind of rebuild that relationship. I like that in that sense as well, too. So, it's kind of a package deal. Like, like a week ago, we were talking about Danielle Hunter being gone. All of a sudden now you're getting Danielle Hunter back, but you're getting him with Za'Darius Smith, and you're going to get one-on-one action across the board on the defensive line now. Because simply the 3-4 alignment makes it more difficult to figure out who you're supposed to be blocking first and foremost. He's probably going to get a zone blocking scheme for the most part, shifting the front to one side in order to kind of cover as many gaps as he possibly can. There's that element to it. And there's also the fact that you don't have enough people up front anymore to block Smith and Hunter with two men. If you're going to try that, you've only got one guy left. You're going to make things easy for Eric Kendricks, Anthony Farr if he returns. I don't think that's going to happen, but you know what I'm saying? Jordan Hicks was brought in with a pretty high pressure rate as well. All these little pieces on this front seven work pretty cohesively, assuming they can stay healthy. And the show that we did prior to last week was all about how Tyler Williams, the dude that they brought in from Los Angeles, has one of the highest success rates of keeping players healthy and on the field since 2017. So a lot of this stuff is kind of working together to paint a better picture. Whereas 3 weeks ago, we were complaining, moaning, whatever term you want to use there. I think it was a little bit deeper than that, but things are starting to come together a little bit. And that really, this one move shifts you from the sense that, all right, now Za'Darius Smith isn't a Raven anymore, which last time we talked, I thought he was going to be a Raven. Now he's a Viking. You've got a leader for your 3-4. You got Danielle Hunter apparently seemingly happy again. We'll have to see what happens when the Vikings media actually gets a chance to interview him as well. And you've got a front seven that's looking like it's being pieced together pretty nicely here for at least a couple years, right?
Yeah.
And the way that Kwesi's doing this is these aren't 5-7 year deals. This is a 3-year deal for Za'Darius Smith, a couple year deal for Jordan Hicks, a 3-year deal for Phillips. All of these deals are basically freeing up cap space for the future so that if these moves don't work out, or if this 1-year project, this 1-year rebuild, this 1-year stay competitive while revamping the roster, whatever Kwesi wants to say, if it doesn't work out, you can get out from underneath all this stuff, right? And you can retry this again with a new quarterback without Kirk Cousins once his deal is done. It sets you up where it's not just kicking the can down the road anymore. It's more like you are kicking the can down the road, but you're going to be competitive while doing so. And then Devontae Adams is in Las Vegas, so all of a sudden you might actually have a chance to compete with Green Bay. So there's a lot of things that have kind of like they're toying with my emotions a little bit here. And I'm a little bit more inclined to be in the camp that says, let's see what happens with Kwesi here before we freak out. But at the same time, I look at the back end of this defense and I think to myself, it really doesn't matter if you have Danielle Hunter and Za'Darius Smith, if it's going to be Chris Boyd and Cam Dantzler back there. So the picture is not complete. The Picasso is not fully ready, but it's starting to come together a little bit here. And I think there's reason to be excited about that.
And the other reason I wanted to bring up, and again, to clarify, and anybody who's listening to this show knows, I wanted the Vikings to actually reset. Not just the competitive reset or rebuild that Kwesi and company have chosen. But if there is, we've talked about some of the reasons that the Vikings could entertain the idea of a competitive rebuild or staying competitive or what have you. You look at the landscape of the league now and how many star players are leaving the NFC for the AFC, leaving the NFC North for the AFC. I mean, Devontae Adams is gone now. Khalil Mack is gone now. And both into the AFC. Russell Wilson is now an AFC quarterback. I mean, there's a huge landscape change happening. And now in the NFC, you have Tampa Bay, who looks like a team that's going to absolutely coast to an NFC South title without any hiccups, and then probably have a 1 or 2 seed, very much the favorite for the 1 seed at this point, right? You have the Packers, you still have Aaron Rodgers. You have Dallas, who is still a little wishy-washy,
little older.
And then you have the Rams, who just obviously won the Super Bowl, but are having a little bit of roster turnover themselves. Robert Woods is gone now. You have
coaching turnover too.
Von Miller gone. Yep. And so you have that. After that, it is to me a pretty wide open NFC conference, and there is a real opportunity there. And again, there's so much turnover year over year in the NFL now, where, teams may or may not drop off, might have some more success than usual, whatever the case might be. But there's a huge power difference between the two conferences. And so there is an opportunity for the Vikings to maybe move their way up the ranks, if you will, in the NFC. And again, this doesn't make them a Super Bowl contender. I don't think it dramatically changes things from their projection for the season, but I think a playoff run in the NFC is far more likely than it is in the AFC for the given teams this year. So I like, from that sense, that gives me a little bit more optimism, knowing that the Vikings are going for it and seizing this potential opportunity that, with the NFC being weak, that a run in the playoffs is a little bit more likely.
Yeah, it's a lot easier. I think that's a great point. I think it's a lot easier right now to do this, quote, competitive rebuild where you're going to try to actually compete to win the North Division while simultaneously revamping this roster. Hell of a lot easier to do that when just kind of by sitting around, your quarterback became top 5 in the conference, right? Kirk Cousins is somewhere between top 5 and top 7. I don't know where you want to rate him. If you're very against Kirk, you might be a little bit lower, but you can't go much lower than top 5 in the conference because there's just not that many guys left anymore. I mean, think about like the Arizona Cardinals, for example. They've lost a lot of their shine, right? They've got Kyler Murray issues. That was one of the top teams in the conference for most of last season, right? The Rams, they won the Super Bowl. You mentioned Aaron Rodgers, of course. Aaron Rodgers lost all his toys. I know they've got some picks. They've got some money to spend as well. We'll see what the Packers do. I still expect them to be the favorite to win the NFC North and potentially the NFC as well. But they, other than those two teams, I don't hate the Vikings' chances against pretty much everyone else. Philadelphia would concern me a little bit if Jalen Hurts is able to take a step forward and they do some other things. Howie Roseman does a good job retooling that offense and their defense. Dallas would make me a little bit nervous, but they are a little bit older. They got guys coming off of injury. There's question marks there as well. Washington, laughable. I mean, what these other NFC
let's
teams
talk
have
about
done
this
is not
now.
good enough.
Let's just go through this. Like NFC teams right now that you would put ahead of Minnesota, and this is very much subject to change because free agency is still happening. Draft is going to happen, but Green Bay, Tampa Bay, Los Angeles Rams, Arizona maybe, Dallas maybe. Those are, I put them ahead. I could see the argument for the Vikings maybe sneaking ahead of them at some point, but those 5 teams I think I put them ahead of the Vikings. But after that, San Francisco is arguable, but you have to put the Vikings as of right now in that top 7 to me, in terms of playoff teams. I think
to me, there's 3 that are confidently better. Green Bay, and these are the divisions winners basically. Green Bay, Tampa Bay, Los Angeles, and then the Vikings. You can make an argument for being as good as or better than Arizona, San Francisco, New Orleans, Philadelphia, and Dallas. So right in that shuffle there, outside of those main 3 powers. And depending on what Green Bay does, I mean, I might like the Vikings' chances against them as well. The Vikings have played them tough the last few years, without, injury luck, solid.
Sean Mannion starting the games
play.
Notwithstanding, right?
Right, exactly. So, I mean, I think there's a realistic shot here for the Vikings to be 9-8, 10-7 might get it done in this NFC if you beat the right teams. And they're going to be playing enough games within the NFC conference that the Vikings might have a bit of an inflated record, right? Like a record where it's like, yeah, it looks really good on paper, but then you kind of they're checking the boxes and you're like,
it's exactly what happened in 2019. I mean, they won 10, they were 10-5. They lost that last game with Mannion starting, but they played, Chase Daniel, actually lost Chase Daniel and Matt Moore, but they played backup quarterbacks. Brandon Allen. They played, who was that guy from Detroit? David Blau. They played
that was fun.
So many backup quarterbacks that year. And so a similar thing could happen this year where the NFC, you look at around who the Vikings might play this year, and you see the NFC and who's going to play quarterback. I mean, you have some real potential to get some wins, I think.
So basically, and I'm free agency isn't over, right? Like there's still things that can happen. Everything we just said is very much subject to change. I mean, our tune has already changed in 7 days just based off of one big signing, right? And I think that that's warranted because if you have these 2 edge rushers, no Devontae Adams in the division anymore, that changes a lot, right? It makes you more competitive within a, relatively speaking, non-competitive conference. So the Vikings might be able to get some things done. At the same time now, they're also very, very weak on the back end of their defense. I would love to see them address that in some capacity. I don't know what they're able to do. Kwesi made the note today that he would sign a cornerback if there's value there. But my problem is that he's getting good at this, right? He's rookie and he's already getting pretty good at it. You've got a 34 defense. Either that's your base or the nickel is going to be your base. At this point in time, you either have 1 hole, 2 holes, or 3 holes, depending on what your base alignment's going to be. You currently don't have a nickel cornerback on your roster unless that's Harrison Hand and nobody told me, right? So for starters, might be something you want to look to address. Number 2, if Cam Dantzer's still a starter and I have question marks, he shouldn't be your number 1. So that means that you've probably got a hole on the outside there. Because unless you're going to re-sign Patrick Peterson and no one's told me yet, that's a problem. And of course, if Cameron Dantzer's your number 1, your number 2 is Chris Boyd. That's a big problem. I love Chris Boyd, but he hasn't proven anything on the field to date. So you've either got 1, 2, or 3 problems on the back end of your defense and Harrison Smith trying to hold the whole damn thing together.
Right. No, and I mean, I tweeted this yesterday and I got a lot of backlash on it. So, is it Ragats?
Yeah.
He's the Sports Illustrated Vikings. he kind of just asked a general question to all his followers. How are you feeling about Kwesi's first offseason so far after getting Za'Darius Smith? And I kind of sarcastically said, this Vikings roster is looking great. All they need is a bunch of cornerbacks, a bunch of offensive linemen, a linebacker, a safety, a tight end. Then they could be right there with the NFC juggernauts. And here's the thing. You're right. There's still a lot of work to do because the cornerback situation is dire would be how I would explain it. It's dire. Mm-hmm. Offensive line, obviously, Darrisaw and O'Neal are great tackles that have great foundation there. The interior still is a major problem. So I would argue you got to go get 3 more interior offensive linemen if you really want to trust that group. Obviously, I don't know if that's realistic, but a lot of people have talked about JC Treader as one example. At linebacker, I know they brought in Jordan Hicks and they have Kendricks. That could be your starter, sure. But I mean, the depth, there's no depth.
Say that about the offensive line too. The depth is
correct.
No
and then same thing with safety. Right now you have Cam Bynum potentially being the starting safety.
He looked good in limited.
He looked really good last year for sure. Limited sample size. Do you trust him as a starter? Otherwise, you need at least to have some sort of backup option there. And if you don't, then you're trusting, like you said, Harrison Hand might be the backup safety for all we know. And then, of course, at tight end, you have Irv Smith back, who looks like a stud and has played like a stud in his career. You had that, who did they bring in from the Rams? More of a blocking type tight end.
Johnny Mund.
Yeah, Mund, that's right. So there's still a lot of flaws in this roster. But with that said, I'm still a big fan of the signing because a healthy Smith-Hunter combo could mask a lot of those holes.
Yeah. We always talk about, right, like what are the 2 areas that you want to pay? Or I should say the 3 areas that you want to pay. The guy throwing the ball, the guy who's trying to stop the guy throwing the ball, and the guy who's blocking the guy that's trying to stop the guy throwing the ball, right?
Then the guy catching the ball.
Yeah, that's important too. It's becoming more important as we've seen with Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams.
I'm scared of the Justin Jefferson contract someday, by the way.
That might be $40 million by the time we get to 2024. But if you could have an elite edge rusher combo, that means keeping both these guys on the field for at least 15 games, if not all 17. Get the type of pressure rate that both of them have been accustomed to facing one-on-one pass blocking. All of a sudden, you can slow down, you could speed up that timer on the back end of your defense, and you really can cover up some of those coverage issues. That also being said, you still have time, right? Free agency is not over. I think there is a solution. I don't know how much money you're going to need. I don't know how much money you can convert to signing bonus, and I don't know what the Vikings are willing to convert to signing bonus in order to open up more cap space at this point in time. But there is things that you can do. In theory, signing Patrick Peterson, drafting, I don't know, maybe Derek Stingley. I know he's got some question marks on the injury front. But if you get a round 1 cornerback and Patrick Peterson and then Cam Dantzler, I'll run with that. That gives you hope, right? There's optimism in that group. I'm not saying it's the perfect solution here, but it does give you a competitive solution. So there's still time to fix this cornerback thing. And by the way, Miles Gorham on our Climbing the Pocket team also pointed out to me this week that Bryce Callahan is still a free agent as well. You guys should remember Bryce Callahan from his time with the Chicago Bears. He was absolute garbage. I believe we made fun of him on our old podcast for about 1.5 years, and then Vic Fangio showed up, threw him in at nickel corner, and he became one of the best in the league. And he's been basically playing in that 3-4 nickel defensive style that Vic Fangio has kind of branched off through all of his all of his different coaches in both Chicago and Denver ever since. So I think that there's a lure for him to come to Minnesota. He's still available, and I don't think he's overly expensive because he's a 30-year-old slot cornerback. So there's still things you can do, right? Like this isn't over yet. And I think that really the main difference in tune here for me is the willingness to actually attack this 34 unit and say, all right, we got to figure out how we're going to get this thing right in basically 3 months. Za'Darius Smith does that. That's the main change in tune for me. Because if you remember last week, I spent 15 minutes complaining about how are you going to try to revamp and give Kirk Cousins the best opportunity to showcase his best self with a defense that doesn't know what it's doing. Well, you guys apparently heard me because you did something, you made a decision where it's like, we're going to bring in a guy that can not only do this defense effectively, knows what he's doing, and it's going to be an important focal point within this unit, but he's a high character, fun personality, big smiley guy that's just enjoyable to listen to, and he can talk. He can work with these guys around him. All of a sudden, things are starting to come together a little bit, right? It didn't look like things were coming together last week, but this signing kind of changes things. And I'm not as mad about Sean Mannion being re-signed anymore either as a result. I'm still mad about that, by the way, but I'm not as mad as I would have been as Za'Darius Smith not been in the building. So I'm excited about this. I like this move a lot, and I think it really has the ability here to kind of move things in the direction where you're actually going to be competitive, and being competitive in the NFC, as Drew pointed out, is going to be a lot easier this year than normal.
Yeah.
So
it gives you a better chance to be actually competitive. I think competitive to me is not just making the 7 seed or 6 seed. It means, being able to win a playoff game or to make a real chance or create yourself a real chance to, win a Super Bowl. That's what this is about. So I think the Vikings are giving themselves a better chance here. And, you kind of have to strike while the iron's hot. It's kind of hot right now with everything moving around in the league. Superstars leaving the division. This is, I like it. There's more work to do, as we talked about, but a step forward. And at the very least, Hunter and Smith, if they can stay healthy, will be really, really fun to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. This team is nothing if not exciting, right?
Oh yeah, content factory.
Okay. Is there anything else that we missed here? I know I kind of loosely mentioned Sean Mannion. I don't want to spend any time with that. You guys.
Yeah. If you don't want, if you don't want to talk about it, we don't have to. I know it's a sensitive subject for you. So if you don't want to talk about it, we don't have to. Clearly there's some, really it doesn't matter until training camp. And then if the Vikings make a decision to keep Mannion after training camp is when that really matters. So
I'll say one thing, and I'm going to keep this under 60 seconds. I'm watching the clock. $1.3 million maximum salary for a dude that should be coaching? That's what I don't get. If you like him as a good locker room presence, a dude that works well with Kirk Cousins and watches film effectively in order to diagnose an opposing defense and implement it into your playbook to give Kirk Cousins the best opportunity, that's a coach. Why is he a quarterback? That's all I got. That's all I got. I got nothing left for Sean Mannion. It is what it is. And Kellen Mond, man, Jesus Christ. I don't know where he is at if they're bringing Sean Mannion back after last year.
I think, honestly, Mannion could be like, O'Connell eventually. Like, that could be his future.
He should be. That's now. The future is now, Sean Mannion. All right. Anything else? Is there anything else?
I think, yeah, we're good here.
Perfect. All right. Before we get out of here, of course, I gotta remind you guys one more time. Lake Monster Brewing, April 29th, 5:30 to 10 p.m. That is the live draft show for Climbing the Pocket. The whole squad will be there. Not Drew and myself, but the rest of the Climbing the Pocket squad will be out there doing some giveaways. Having some fun out there, and great beer, good times. Plenty of opportunities to kind of enjoy the team, enjoy football, and get some nice beer at the same time there. So that's April 29th, 5:30 to 10, Lake Monster Brewing. Be there. Should be fun, right? In terms of us, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, wherever else you listen to your podcast, we are available. If you prefer to watch these videos and you feel the need to see whether or not I actually did cross my fingers at the beginning of this episode, you can find us on YouTube. We are available there. I don't do anything crazy with the video and visual effects or anything like that. So, if you want to do that, hey, more power to you. But if you don't, I recommend the audio. It's probably a little bit more fun, a little easier to make access to. But we do have an availability on YouTube. And lastly here, Daily Norseman, Climbing the Pocket. Those are our two home bases. If you don't like me screaming about Sean Mannion, there's probably someone else on this network of shows Monday through Friday, some live, some on podcasts, where you will enjoy someone a little bit more than myself screaming in your ear about Sean Mannion. It's probably somewhere Monday through Friday, somewhere in there, Climbing the Pocket. And for your written content, Daily Norseman. That's our home base. That's where you can find this show a lot of the time. And I imagine a lot of you guys actually do find us right there. So you know what I'm talking about, but make sure to check out the Daily Norseman. And that's all I got for you today. So I'm in a great mood, man. I'm excited about Za'Darius Smith. I'm excited about the potential of this team. And I'm excited to see what they might do at cornerback, whether that's Patrick Peterson, Derek Stingley, Sauce Gardner. I don't care. find an answer at cornerback, and all of a sudden this team has a chance. So thank you, folks, for listening, and we'll catch you next week.